Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So, how does leadership, followership, authority, and structures emerge in groups? Where do leaders, change agents, and group and systems practitioners go to get the very best development on how to deepen their capacity to survive and thrive in difficult systems? And where do they go to hone the craft of acting in the face of uncertainty? Well, many of them actually go to the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, which for many people is the spiritual home of organization development. Since 1947, the Tavi, as it's affectionately known, has been one of the world's pioneering organizations exploring how group dynamics and relations formed. So we're absolutely delighted to have Rachel Kelly join us today. She's principal and trustee from the Tavistock, and she official title is Organization Development and Change Consultant, and also a group relations consultant. Rachel's been at the Tavistock for 20 years and holding a number of roles, and is the veteran of facilitating 17 Leicester conferences, which, as we start to explore what a Leicester conference is as well, you'll start to understand what an amazing experience that she has, and has facilitated other group relations conferences around the world. In fact, she just recently returned from delivering it in Shanghai. Is that right, Rachel?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a group relations conference, but it was about being a group relations consultant. So we have a Tavistock Institute China, and they have a program training people. So I went for module 2 with my colleague, and it was a great experience.
And we'll explore the cultural differences in a moment as well. So the Leicester Conference, and Rachel will give us a much better definition, is a 14-day experiential where a temporary organisation is set up and all the members and staff co-create the culture and practice of the organisation, and all types of emotions emerge, from fighting to learning, from working to questioning, getting stuck and unstuck, crying, laughing, and everything in between. And that's the official copy of the event. so
Yeah.
that's official. Rachel has a very diverse background, and she also practices the Alexander technique, which is an indirect Zen practice for enhancing movement and being, which we'll explore in more detail as we go through the session as well. So we're all set up for a fascinating discussion as we explore the world of group relations. So welcome, Rachel.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
So just to get started, just tell us a bit about your role and what you do. What does being a group relations consultant mean?
That's just one of my hats. So I do all sorts of things. So being a group relations consultant means you go on staff at group relations conferences, which, as Garen was saying, they're kind of a very discreet thing. They can vary from 2 or even less to 14 days. And the Leicester conference, which is from the Tavistock Institute, is like the mothership. It's the original. It started in 1957. And it involves, well, the members of the conference, they arrive from all over the world, usually between 25 and to 30 different nationalities, and they get into groups. So there are some set groups. So there's a small group that a member would be in, and then there's the large group, which is all the members. And then you consult, as a consultant, you would consult, say, to a small group, or you might consult to the large group. And you're really exploring, really hypothesizing about what you think might be happening in the group under the surface. So it's all about the unconscious impact, well, the impact of the unconscious on the group and the group's behavior. So it's a way of learning. It's kind of experiential. So it's very visceral. You kind of feel it. And you feel all sorts of things, in fact, and you're working out, learning about how people behave in groups, basically. So ultimately, it's about teamwork, it's about leadership, it's about followership, authority, taking up your own personal authority, in fact, which again is a kind of embodied, visceral thing. You can kind of feel it when you're taking up your authority, you feel it. Yeah, so it's endlessly fascinating, and I love it.
So that's one part of your role. What do the other bits of your role look like?
That's Monday.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of things. So basically, recently, yesterday, we just started a new cohort of our reading seminars. So Manny Sher, who's pretty famous in the field, and David Lawler, also famous in the field, wrote 3 books about system psychodynamics. So we're doing these seminars, and we're just starting on book 3 yesterday with a new cohort. So book 3 is like interviews with famous OD people in the field, like Bion, Bridger, Isabel Mengi's live. I mean, I think there's 26 different interviews. So we just started it yesterday. So I was working with Manny on that one. I'm also helping to organise something called Belgerati. It's a meeting held every 3 years for group relations practitioners. So if you've been on staff at the group relations conference, then you come and meet all your peers and colleagues. It's actually in Portugal, and have a great time over 3 days. So there's like presentations and lectures, keynote lectures, but also there's a bit of the experiential as well, because we can't not do our experiential stuff. And then we're also, I think next week, we're expecting some students from China. So we're going to give them a little taster of group relations. And we've also got art exhibitions in our office, which kind of rotate and change. So they'll have a tour of the art exhibition. And then I'm going to be the associate director at the Leicester conference in August. So I've been thinking about that with the rest of the directorate. I also directing there's like a subgroup within the conference of more advanced people, you could call them, the deepening praxis training group. So I've been thinking about them and how it's going to be staff deployment and all that. And then again, in the Leicester conference, there's something called the BODE, which is the Bear or Dare event. So there's the visual theme of the brochure is a polar bear. So that's where we've got that from. So I've been thinking about its structure and how to introduce it. So the BODE is about co-creating using innovative, holistic practices, so not your normal talking, to explore leadership in different ways. So this links to the Alexander technique, in fact. So it's less about talking, more about movement, the embodiment of leadership. So this BODE thing is going to be about finding your inner bear, bearing yourself and your vulnerabilities, daring to take risks. And I'm very fond of Pooh Bear, so I'll be talking about the Tao of Pooh as well.
It sounds fascinating. There's real variety in the role, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I like about it. Yeah, it's completely, there's loads of different stuff. You never know what's going to be coming up. And there's something about being challenged. So it's not easy work. So it can be anxiety provoking. So one of my main things over the years has been about managing my anxiety and being able to contain other people's anxiety. So that's like an ongoing thing. And group relations and the Alexander technique help with that. So the Alexander technique is used in drama schools, music schools, because it's really about how you take up a role. I mean, there's the kind of practical thing where, you know, people, when they're going on stage, they get stage fright and, you know, it's kind of feels terrible. So Alexander technique helps with that. It's difficult to explain really, but it's about not getting stuck in your habits, basically. So it's about releasing habits of tension, but it's not just a physical thing, it's a psychophysical thing. So you're doing it with your mind, as it were.
For people who don't know the Tavistock Institute, can you just tell us a bit more about it? How does it differ to other organisations out there and other people in the same field?
The Tavistock Institute, it's quite small, but it's got a very large reach. So it's very international. So our work can be in all sorts of places. We do basically research, consultancy, evaluation, and professional development. So we have a variety of professional development programs, and we have the Leicester conference. And then we'll go and do consultancy in all kinds of different organisations. Recently, over the last 5 years, we've brought in an arts and organisations strand. So that's about bringing creativity into your work. And I've benefited from this really, because while I was on the faculty of a program, so a PD program, we've got the Deepening Creative Practice in Organisations program. And out of that, we'd been thinking about moving home offices for ages, and we hadn't done anything about it. But I kind of got it going. And then when we'd found the place, I designed the interior, which I never would have thought I would be able to do, but I kind of went ahead and did it. And it's, you know, it's really nice. It's a lovely interior. We help people, help organizations to work more efficiently, to think about and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and, you know, giving them the space if they want to change. In the same way, we also, to a certain extent, apply that to ourselves. So we're always kind of looking at what we're doing, why we're doing it, creating spaces to think and reflect. And in, you know, this hectic world, you know, lots of organizations don't do that, and to their detriment. And we can also, you know, talk about our feelings as well. So it's much more open, I suppose, than the average organization in that sense.
Just a question for you. So you said there that you're able to take risks at Tavistock.
Yeah.
We talk to a lot of organisations who want their teams and their people to take risks, but their people just don't, although they haven't created the conditions for it. What is it about the conditions you're working in that make it comfortable and safe to take a risk?
I think you're allowed to make mistakes. I think that's a big thing. So it's not the end of the world. That you're allowed to learn from the mistakes rather than go into shame about them. I suppose that's like a big thing. I think the culture, to a great extent, is created by the CEO. So that's Elietta Ram, and she's very skilled, expert group relations practitioner. You know, she's known throughout the world for it. So she's running the organization. Not completely, because that would be impractical, but, you know, there's these echoes and resonances around how group relations works in a particular, the laboratory of the conference, and then the organization is kind of absorbed into the organization somehow. Those kind of ideas and ways of doing things and being.
And what's been your journey into the profession? What were the sort of steps that led you to be associate director of conferences, and what were even your first experience of being in some of these conferences?
So I kind of fell into it, really. I started my career, well, I was 9 years in an art book publisher, so I was there for quite a long time. Then I worked for a forensic psychiatrist, and then I worked at the School of Oriental and African Studies in the Near and Middle East department. And then I worked for a neurobiologist at UCL. I kind of felt like that, you know, these were all kind of building up to, yeah. I was temping and at the institute, and they offered me a job. So I took it, even though I'd been offered other jobs and I hadn't taken them, and it made no sense for me to take this one. So it was a bit odd. I have to say, but anyway, I did. And I started working for Manny Share as his PA, and that was administrating the Leicester conference. So I went to the Leicester conference as the administrator. I had no idea about anything about group relations. It was quite shocking. Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. People were talking in a particular way. I was kind of understood it, but I didn't understand it. So I was kind of trying to work it out. But I could tell there was something in it. It felt like it was real. It was about how organizations are. I think that was it. That kind of kept me interested and kind of, otherwise I probably wouldn't have, because it was kind of difficult. So I don't think these conferences are for everybody. It's for those people who like, you know, to kind of explore and experiment and take risks, I guess. Yeah, so then I just carried on, and it kind of got easier as I was doing it. And then I took on, I remember walking with Eliat to go and get some lunch. And she said she was going to take over the yoga event, the leadership of the yoga event in the Leicester conference. And I thought, I can do a better job than you. I kind of have done, you know, I'm doing the Alexander technique. And I didn't say that. I said, you know, I can perhaps do that instead of you. And she said, okay, yeah, kind of thing. I think she was quite glad. But then I thought, oh no, what have we said? So that was quite scary, because I don't know what's going to happen. So, but yeah, I did it, and I kind of made it my own through using the Alexander technique. So that was an experience in itself. And it's kind of, the yoga event became the embodying role event. Now it's the Bode, so it kind of has different incarnations in the conference itself.
Did you start with the Alexander technique?
When I was working for the UCL professor of neurobiology, I had a back problem, had a slip disc, and he got me an operation. And then I remember talking to the finance guy, and he said, he'd had 2 slip discs and he was doing the Alexander technique. So I didn't kind of pay much attention to it, but then somehow it kind of stuck somehow. So then I started having lessons. And then when I came to the institute, the first guy I was working for, he semi-retired. So I started training at that point. So I've been learning the Alexander technique and the group relations kind of simultaneously. So they're kind of within me. I can't really separate them out in some ways.
The group conference feels like it's a really big part of your career. What's the premise behind it? Like, how do you get people to engage in the process? Like, what's the setup to get people engaged for you, for like, you know, anything between like 3 and 14 days?
Yeah, well, basically, people get stuck. They're not sure what's going on. They're wanting to find out what's going on in their team. So part of the conference is about application. So working out from your learning so far how you might work with stuff that's actually happening to you back in your office. It's very practical in a lot of ways. So you can, although it's not a kind of thing, you know, I can't say to you, this is what you should do. We would never say that. You're given just ideas to think about. So people, basically, they're working it out for themselves. You could say that they're empowering themselves, I suppose, to be able to work in their own way with what's going on for them. So it's kind of fits everything, because ultimately you're kind of working it out for yourself. I suppose that's the beauty of it in some ways. So it's not a pat thing. This is what you should do to resolve or solve this. You're kind of, the members each have their own journey, basically. So they each find something, or loads of things usually, from the conference, which they can use in their work. And like the ripples from the conference, the resonances kind of stay with you, like for years. Basically, they carry on, kind of coming up as aha moments, kind of thing. Oh.
And when you bring like 24, 25 people to random people together, and you
50 to 60.
Oh, sorry, 50 to 60 more so. When you bring 50 to 60 people together, what kind of patterns do you often see emerging? Because these are people that haven't met before. They're now having to sort of share a space together. Yeah, he says sort of leadership and followership and structure emerges. Like, what kind of patterns do you often see? And does it sort of follow that things often emerge at similar times throughout the process?
It's not so easy to see patterns like that. There are certain ways in which groups behave. So they, Bion called it groupishness. So rather than getting on with their task, the group will start doing something else. So basically, mainly because of anxiety. And the anxiety might be because, well, they've just met, so that's very anxiety provoking. Any kind of transition stage is anxiety provoking. Or there's lots of different nationalities, so people are worried about difference. Or maybe there's a Russian, a Chinese, and an American in the group they're in, so you have these superpowers, is anxiety provoking. So then the group gets distracted and starts doing other things. There's various things that Bion and others have described as groupishness. So a classic one might be fight or flight. Probably heard of that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So people argue. Everyone's looking at the two that are arguing. So they're just being entertained in effect, if you like. Or someone gets up and does something with the blinds or something, they're kind of flying off. They're trying to avoid what's going on, that kind of stuff.
And so is it the right word? Like, is it like an intervention or just a sort of a noticing by?
It's we call it a hypothesis. So we're saying maybe this is going on. We don't actually know what's going on in the unconscious definitively, but from my experience, this is what I think might be happening. So you're bringing it to the group, and then they can work with it or not as they choose.
Like person A reaches for the blind, and it could be a number of things, like to sort of exert some control or to just distract or something like that. Yeah. So they're kind of learning about how they turn up in a group setting, are they? And like what might be some of the insight they receive from that?
So I would never, as a consultant, I would never speak to an individual about the individual. I would only ever talk about what's happening in the group. Mm-hmm. So the individual is obviously in the group, and the individual is trying to work out how to be in the group without losing their individuality and without being rejected by the group. So they're always in a state of tension. I'm not sure I can really give, apart from in the moment, I can't really say what I would say, if you see what I mean, because it all depends on the context and what else is going on. So that's a bit tricky. I can't really say exactly what I would say.
But I guess it's a fascinating thing that you're picking out there, isn't it? Which is all of the things that are going on for an individual when they're trying to find their place, isn't it? That I love that blend. You're talking about the balance between being an individual but being a member of the group. For example, all these things that are going on individually and collectively in the moment that are people finding. So does that mean that people have sort of quite big breakthrough moments in there, or sort of quite provocative moments?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Breakthrough and provocative, so it can be a bit of a roller coaster, the experience. I remember particularly at the beginning it was really like a roller coaster. System psychodynamics, I suppose, is the paradigm, which kind of the umbrella where group relations and group dynamics and stuff kind of falls into. So it's like a huge field, and it's multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary, so you can always bring your whole self as well, which about being authentic at work. So less hiding, less masking. Although I'm not saying that I don't mask, obviously everybody does, but it's kind of freeing. It's freeing. That's what it is. Certainly I had this aha moment, which I couldn't kind of believe. So like about quite early on, maybe my third conference, one of the other staff gave me a poem to type out. And as I was typing it, I was thinking, oh, this poem is about me. This is my, what I've been experiencing. But, it can't be about me, because how can he be inside my head? How does he know what's going on in my head? And then I realized that actually, he was kind of working with the unconscious of the groups, and different parts of the system mirror other parts. So my feelings, which I thought were just my feelings and experiences, actually were in other people as well. And it was really, I had a really powerful experience of like not being alone. It was really, I'm affected by it now, actually. Yeah.
That's the real power of experiential work, though, isn't it? Like you can have it in a training room, but to actually it's I used to say, use the word visceral, didn't you? Like you can, it's almost like you get the recall afterwards. You can still feel it sometimes, can't you? Wow, fascinating. And what do you enjoy most about your role? You've got huge variety in it. What kind of things do you enjoy the most?
I like the fact that I like the variety. So, understanding more about different organizations. So when we're doing projects, working with my colleagues, so we usually work in pairs if we're going into consultancy. So you're always with someone else who you can kind of talk to about what's going on, which I think is really valuable. I'm encouraged to study and to write, or do a lot of travel, although there is the ecological side of that now, which we're kind of addressing at the moment. So our work basically is much more effective in person, but so we're developing the online presence, as I was talking about, so with these courses. So I've really enjoyed, even though I'm really ultimately about the in-person, I kind of enjoy doing the online stuff, so I really like doing that. There's something about the poetry in words that's, we use metaphor, and so it's kind of really rich the way, well, I'm not sure about me, but other people who are talking about the ideas, it's kind of always really fascinating and rich. And as I was saying, the creativity, I'm encouraged to be creative. It's like if I can bring my whole self to work. So, when I was, at the beginning, near the beginning, when, I was just learning the Alexander technique, I was being encouraged then to bring that, but I wasn't able to kind of articulate it at that point. But as you can tell, I'm not necessarily that good at articulating it now, because it's a bit like the way, if you like. So I don't know if you know the Tao, which is like a path to a universal way of being, like an indirect path, but you can't really talk about it directly. It's always indirect. The Alexander technique is like that. So I'm really getting into the Tao and leadership, and wanting to basically working out what kind of qualities I need to be more DAO, if you like. Finding my inner poo. That's how I describe it. Poo with an H on the end.
It sounds like it's a real learning journey being a consultant, isn't it? It doesn't sound as if like you're projecting yourself into the role of expert. It's
No.
how does that work? That kind of learning journey that you're on.
I suppose even in these group relations conferences, the staff are there to provide learning opportunities for the members. That's the main thing. However, it just so happens that actually you're learning as being a staff member at the same time. So and if you think of yourself as the expert, as the one that knows, that can be problematic in that you're not in a learning mode. And it's partly about modeling the learning mode for the members so that they can see you doing that. You don't have to know everything. And there's the idea of hypothesizing. You're not saying this is how it is. You're saying perhaps something is going on like this, which I like that. And I am always, well, not always, I guess, but I would like to be always in the learning mode, really. Well, it's about curiosity, developing your curiosity, I think.
When you think about the work you do, what do you find most challenging?
Well, I mentioned before about the anxiety. That is probably the most challenging thing.
In the group setting, do people sort of project their emotions onto you? There's a constant sort of feeling of that?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of projections. So you're the authority figure, as it were, in the group, and they look to you to lead it, but of course you don't lead it. So then they get really annoyed because you're not leading it, you're consulting to it. It can be a bit confusing. It's about staying in your role, being clear about your role as far as possible, although, you're developing the role. The more you do it, you have different ideas about it as you go along. Again, that's the kind of interesting part of it, because it doesn't you never kind of know it. There's always more stuff to kind of find out. That's what I like about it. Challenging wise, I suppose I keep on testing myself, really. So kind of in the taking risks, doing things that I don't know that I'm going to be able to do. I think that's the kind of challenging thing. So experimenting and saying I'll do so. This is what I keep doing. I'll say I'm going to do something, and then I have to do it.
Leads to an interesting work life, doesn't it? From your perspective, what's some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way in this journey?
I suppose I've really mentioned them already. So taking risks to realize your potential, that I'm not alone with my feelings. I'm not just an individual having my feelings. That we're all in groups. Even if we're in a group in our heads, we're in lots of different groups. And our feelings they are our own, but they're also other people's too. I suppose one big thing is people pushing their anxiety onto me, so projecting their anxiety onto me. This was very much at the beginning. So that's a kind of classic, not having to accept projections. They don't have to accept them. That's a good one.
And very hard fought lessons they are as well, because it's almost like they also talk about in OD, like sort of self as instrument, isn't it? And it's understanding that you're part of it. And when you're in a group setting, it's that power, because the invitation to become the lead or to be is so seductive and strong, isn't it? They come from a system that's how things are, that kind of learned helplessness, isn't it? And
exactly.
How do you notice it in the moment? Do you have supervision as well?
So in the conference, we have like staff meetings. So we have lots of staff meetings. So they go on till, well, I have been in ones that went on to like 1 a.m. or so. They don't do that anymore. Let's say 11:30 or something like that. So you're meeting in the stuff. So that's like the way, talking about what's going on. Talking not so much about the members, but about the themes, what's going on, how we're finding it, that kind of stuff.
So it's like a debrief that happens at the end of the day.
Yeah, and in the middle, bits in the middle, and sometimes, for a few minutes after particular events. So we're always trying to check in.
And what you talked about, taking some of your learning online, so using that platform to test out online learning for teamwork. What have you learned along the way so far in kind of doing that? Because it's quite a different way of working and interacting.
Yeah, so I was quite worried, how are we going to translate some of our work so it's easy to understand by the average person? So there was that, making it into something that people would be interested in doing. I think we've managed to do that. But there is this, without the experiential aspect to it, it's a little, it's not the same. It's, they're doing it is just like a course, basically. Although they're encouraged to journal, to think about what's happening, thinking about the course, the ideas in the course, and then thinking about their work. So they're encouraged to kind of, apply what they're learning. And also there's like social learning. So they've got their co-learners. So lots of them have been writing stuff underneath each of the steps. So it's kind of broken down into small chunks of steps.
Journaling's such a powerful tool, isn't it? We're always trying to get people that we work with to journal. What is the power of journaling from your perspective? What does it do?
The main thing, I guess, it's giving you a chance to reflect. So it's like a space for yourself to think about what's going on. And just giving yourself that space means all sorts of other things come out, and you make connections between different things, which you may not have done otherwise without the journal. It's like a precious space to write or record, and it's kind of honoring yourself. I think when people journal, I think that's an important thing as well. You don't have to write very much. You can write as little or as much as you like. I think, it shouldn't be a chore. It should be something that's kind of really makes more of what you're learning, and kind of really, I think, have a profound effect on what you're learning.
So is there a resource that you've been inspired by, or a book that you've particularly enjoyed? It could be a podcast, that something that you've actually read in your journey or recently, just thinking, that's really developed my thinking.
I suppose the Tao of Pooh. There's something called A Widening Field, that's written by an Alexander teacher and a dancer, which is it's really you can just dip into it. It's really nice. I think anyway, A Widening Field is the name of the book. It's like journeys into the imagination. I really like that book. It's great. Got pictures, and then it's got poems and writes kind of all sorts of different things. It's really great. I'm really enjoying the third book by Manny and David that I was talking about systems psychodynamics. So all three books I think are really good, but the third one, like the interviews with the people, you kind of get to know the people from the past. It's great, where they were coming from when they were kind of working it out.
Right. And Manny's great, because was it Manny that I met at the book launch where I met you and I got free advice? We had a particular senior manager we were working with, and I was stuck, and so I talked to him, and he said, maybe you should think about the fact that he's splitting. And I was like, yeah, now I see it. Thank you.
Manny's great. He brings so he's in the hospital, he's having dialysis, and he actually brought brought this research group together in the hospital with other people about home dialysis. So he's kind of literally doing his work while he's doing that.
The Tavistock, and obviously sort of echo, when I went in there, it didn't look how I thought it would do. It does look like little zones that you can do different things. But it must be quite an inspiring place, because there's a lot of very insightful people around there. You must constantly bump it. The conversations in the corridors must be absolutely fascinating there, mustn't they?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I don't really think about it, but it's true. Yes. Although, in many ways, it's very ordinary as well. So it's not like a kind of ivory tower. Everyone's kind of super a lot of them are super intellectual, actually. I can't deny it.
But you can just have a cup of tea and a gossip every once in a while.
Exactly.
And then just one more question to wrap us up. So if somebody was thinking of kind of entering this space, starting to work in this kind of the field of group relations, or the work that you do, what advice would you give them?
I'd say go for it. I mean, it's endlessly fascinating. So, human behavior and group behavior, it's like, you never get tired of it. And it has meaning in it, in that, you're helping people to work out how they can make their lives better. So it's very satisfying, that you're helping people avoiding, the pain and heartache that when you're at work, and it's really difficult. It's really horrible, isn't it? It affects your whole life. So being able to help people to get out of that situation, or giving the space to get out of it.
And if people are taking their first steps into group relations, like where is a good place? Is it to get like an accredited core or some kind of certification, or like how do people get those initial bits of experience? Or is it just to immerse yourself in the field and read Wilfred Bion and whoever else?
So I would recommend experiencing it first, then reading about it. And then when you're reading, you think, yeah, that's what was happening then, kind of thing. So there's group relations conferences around the world. So there's quite a few to choose from. And then ultimately the best, well, obviously I'm going to say it is the best one because it's, the longest, the deepest immersion, you learn the most. I recommend coming to the Leicester conference.
Brilliant. I think, Danny, we're going to have to check our training budget here to see if we can put ourselves both on it.
Well, if you really want to come, there's a bursary, you get early, not now though, it's too late for this year, but there's early birds and discounts and bursaries. So yeah, if somebody really wants to come, we like to be able to help them to come if at all possible.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation. You've really opened our eyes to a whole range of different areas and really given a lot of people areas to focus on and to read more into. And just the field of group relations sounds absolutely fascinating. 3 things that I'm taking away from the conversation today. Obviously, just the importance of projection. It's such a thing, and noticing when it's happening and how it impacts you as well, and separating what's people stuff and your own personal things as well. You introduced the idea of groupishness by Bion, which I thought was a fascinating concept. What is it that people do, and being aware of it. Oh yeah, so the thing you were talking about in terms of when you're feeling something individually, it's very likely that the group are also feeling the same thing as well. So actually that's potentially data that people need to be aware of too. Danny, how about you? What are you taking away?
I was going to reflect some of that, but I think for me, the importance of having a hypothesis and holding it very lightly and never enforcing your views and certainty on others. I love what you said about the staff being there to provide learning opportunities for participants. I think if we have that as our frame, then we're not going to go far wrong. And then just the very last, almost the last thing you said about experience first, then read. And that's probably me, because I'm inclined to do it the other way around, to read and then experience. So that's kind of my own stuff.
Well, thanks very much. I had a really great time. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't expecting to, because it's a podcast. But yeah, I've kind of enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And if everybody wants to connect you based on today's conversation or follow your work, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, or even the Tavistock as well?
I can send you a website and give my email address. I'm happy for people to drop me an email. Depends what they want, really. But I'm happy to have a chat, conversations with people about whatever, interests them. So that's the main thing.
Well, I think our audience will be really interested to learn it. And we'll also, what we'll do is we'll add it in the show notes, like your LinkedIn profile, and we'll put links to the Tavistock and the Leicester conference as well. Because I think there's lots of fascinating, and we may even sprinkle a few of your book references in there too. I know that Danny and I are definitely going to read them too.
Yes.
Well,
I've got another one, Body Learning by this great, he's American, but the stuff about leadership at the back of it. It's about the Alexander technique. Body Learning by, what's his name?
We love a good book reference.
Add it to my pile.
Michael Gelb.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for seeing us as soon as you've come back from China. So we're really appreciative of your time. And thanks for sharing a little bit of the mystery about what happens at the Tavistock and the big impact that it makes as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.